This is The Micro Effect.
The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their backs confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand.
Well, good morning. It's Tuesday, the 23rd of July, and today on Connecting the Dots, we have a program with two people who I think are just incredible individuals. Hal Shurtleff is the co-founder and director of Camp Constitution, and we're going to be talking about what Camp Constitution is throughout the program today. But I also have on the call as well a very good friend of mine, Alex Newman, who is an educator, and he works in a program that is homeschool based, and he is going to be talking about the reason for Camp Constitution, and that reason is really because we have got a education system in this country, a re-education system is a more appropriate term for it, where we're teaching communism and socialism and Marxism as the future of our country. And our young people are being indoctrinated on a daily basis in a system that is totally antithetical to what our founders' vision of our constitutional republic is all about. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I want to welcome our two guests. Hal Shurtleff. Hal, welcome to the program, and maybe give our listeners a little bit of information on your background.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on today. Yeah, my name is Hal Shurtleff. I am the co-founder and director of Camp Constitution, which is a charitable trust that we founded back in 2009. And I guess our agenda could be summed up by our motto: honoring the past, teaching the present, preparing the future. And in addition, I'm a lifetime Boston resident. I kind of learned things living in Boston during the height of forced busing in the 70s. So I had a good dose of not only the heavy hand of the federal government, but how our nation's enemies create race hatred. I served a stint in the U.S. Army and Army Reserves, 101st Airborne. I did serve on the staff of the JBS for 26 years as a field coordinator. And then in 2016, I left the staff, and we created a full-time position for me. And just like you, we're called Patriots. I'm a proud member of the Sons of the American Revolution.
Well, good. Hal, I have to tell you, I was really pleased to see that you are a SAR member. I have a good friend here in Montana who was absolutely intent that I should be a member of the SAR because he likes my patriotism, and he did all the work. very little of the work. His name is Bob Gunderson, and he is he was the executive secretary for the state of the SAR, and he went as far as Salt Lake City to go look up my family tree and go through everything to find that I actually did have members of my mother's side of the family were involved in the Revolutionary War and supporters of the Continental Army. So that was really pleasing, and I just became a member about 2 months ago. So
well, that's good for you.
I was pretty tickled. If anybody would love to be an SAR member, it was me, and I never even thought about it. But I have to say, on my father's side of the family, they were Germans, and they were socialists, and probably fought on the side of the Brits. I wouldn't doubt
Hessians,
that they
right?
were Hessians. So, in any case, it's certainly good to welcome you to. We need to be talking about why Camp Constitution is such an important program, and why we need to be bringing our young people back to the understanding of what our constitutional republic is all about.
Well, not only is it important for young people, but also middle-aged and adults. We have year-round activities, and some of those activities include information tables at homeschool shows, and setting up at the Red Pill Expo where I met you. And I have a little 10-question quiz I like to give people on the Constitution, and they come by the table, they get a free copy. And whether you are young, old, middle-aged, most people have very little knowledge of the Constitution. Even at the Red Pill Expo, now you had a few people that aced the test, but a lot of people who might be experts on certain subjects. They might be experts on the vaccine issue or some health issues or some history issues, but they don't have a good understanding of the Constitution. And I think that's really the fundamental thing, is to have a good understanding. And so our goal is to not just to teach young people, but people of all ages, the things that we are a republic, not a democracy, that Congress and the President and the Supreme Court have limited powers, limited by the Constitution. And the President of the United States is not the most powerful man in the world. That's not his job description. And we have had these wars, they call them police actions, and the Constitution says we have to declare war instead of before we send thousands of soldiers overseas. And people will come by the table and they'll think the President declares war, and they'll say, well, Korea, that was a police action. And I'll say, show me in the Constitution, there's a little index there. It says, show me where it says police action. Show me where it says foreign aid is allowed. And they'll look at you and say, geez, I never thought of it that way. Show me where the federal government has anything to do with education. It's not in there. In fact, it's great to, these libraries, especially in the Northeast, you get these old libraries, and they're getting rid of their older conservative-minded books or what have you. And a couple of years ago, I went to a library, I live right in the city of Boston, so about maybe 20 miles west, a little town. And for $1, or maybe it was 50 cents, I got this book published in 1941 by the U.S. government. It was called The Formation of the Union Under the Constitution. Kind of a heavy book, too. And they had a little catechism. And now this is the New Deal Democrats. Franklin Roosevelt was the president, and you had a Democrat Congress, pretty firmly entrenched. And even in that book, it said that it asked the question, what role does the federal government have in education? And the answer was none. You see, and this was under the New Deal Democrats. So I show people this, and I say, well, what happened since then? There's been no amendments added to the Constitution. So why is there a Department of Education? Why do they give states millions and billions of dollars to take something called Common Core? I mean, look at you. See, so the average American is not paying attention. And we have lots of problems. I think that's one of the biggest ones. We know there are some forces, some powerful organizations that are undermining us. We know that. But if the average American simply just took the time to read the Constitution, I think that can go a long way to getting our country back where it should be.
Yeah, I agree, Hal. Ignorance is one of the things that are are going to destroy our constitutional republic, because the reality is, most people are fairly intelligent. They just are ignorant because our education system has been intentionally dumbing them down and steering them in the wrong direction for a very long time. And that's why I want to introduce Alex Newman, because Alex is very aware of, how our history of our country has progressed through the education system. Even prior to John Dewey, we had all these programs that were gearing our thinking towards collectivism, and it's been put on hyperdrive really since the turn of the century, and especially since the 1920s. And of course, there's a lot of history on that. And Alex, welcome to the program. And that's really an area that you excel in. And I want you to kind of talk about why it's so important that we have an organization like Camp Constitution to try to bring the truth to people of all ages in our country.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the program, Dan. It's great to be with you, and it's great to hear from you, Hal. And, one of the things that I've been documenting for many years now is what's happening in the public education system. We've been documenting it. I started documenting it back in, I think, 2010, 2011 is when I started focusing in on education at the New American Magazine, because there was just starting to be whispers of Common Core. Local newspapers were reporting that these new standards were being considered, and I thought, that's interesting. So I started looking, and I never went to a public school in America, and actually most of my history lessons abroad I got from an anti-American perspective. And then I went to university. I went to the University of Florida, and I took one history. All I was required to have was one history class to be able to graduate, and the history class was taught by a Marxist feminist grad student, and literally we had two books. One was on feminism, one was on the civil rights movement. Both of them portrayed America as this horrible place, at least until feminists and certain civil rights leaders showed up on the scene. Right? They're always careful to praise the Marxist civil rights leaders, the ones who really stirred up trouble, rather than the true heroes, people like George Schuyler of the John Birch Society or Julia Brown of the John Birch Society, who really went around campaigning for genuine civil rights without government tyranny to accompany them, without communism on the side. And that was pretty appalling to me. And I remember perfectly, in fact, she was teaching us things that weren't even true. I mean, actual absurdities. Like she got the 17th Amendment wrong, and it was definitively wrong. So I had to raise my hand and point out, no, sorry, actually the 17th Amendment dealt with elections to the Senate. You have it wrong. And she was so mad, she kicked me out of class. And since then, that was over 10 years ago now. Since then, I've really determined that education has got to be at the center of any solution for fixing America, because all these other battles that we're fighting they're going to be lost if we don't take the education issue seriously. They have 87% of our young people in the government brainwash camp, and there's no way that parents or Sunday school or Camp Constitution or the John Birch Society or anybody is going to be able to compete against that sort of indoctrination. So, what we're arguing right now, I'm actually on a national speaking tour right now promoting a special report we did in the New American called Rescuing Our Children. We're urging parents to get their children out of public school immediately. But then, if they've been in public school for 10 years, you have some serious catching up to do, right? You have all kinds of stuff that you should have learned that you never learned, and I've been documenting a lot of that. In addition to writing in the New American, also I've got an education blog now, the Newman Report, and one of the things I've done is examine these history books. And so when you realize what these kids are learning under the guise of history, you realize, wow, they don't know anything about America. In fact, Dr. Duke Pesta, they don't know anything about the true America. Dr. Duke Pesta, who I'm working with, gives a survey. He runs the Freedom Project Academy where I teach, and he also is involved with Camp Constitution, and he teaches at universities. He used to be at Purdue, now he's at the University of Wisconsin, and he surveys his new students as they come in, and he says every year since he's been doing these surveys, more than half of the young people in his class believe that America invented slavery. So that gives you a sense of just how ignorant these poor victims of the government schools are. Not only do they not realize that slavery has been this ubiquitous institution that's been with us since the dawn of time in virtually every culture and virtually every civilization, they actually think that America is this uniquely evil nation that invented it, as opposed to being, the nation that was founded on the principles, like God created us equally and endowed us all with inalienable rights, that were responsible for ending slavery, not just in America, but really all over the world. I mean, you could still buy and sell slaves legally up to a few years ago in parts of Africa, right? In Mauritania, for example, they didn't criminalize buying and selling slaves until 2007. So, American kids don't know any of this stuff, and because they don't know any of this stuff, they don't realize what they're frittering away. Right? We have this amazing, incredible nation, and with this incredible system of government, with this incredible history, this incredible heritage that was just handed to us on a silver platter. And so many of our young people, in fact, the majority of our young people today prefer socialism because they're so ignorant. So now we need to figure out, now we need to do the hard work of getting these kids a proper understanding of America. And so this is going to take, an all-of-society effort. One of the great things that is happening right now that people can participate in is Camp Constitution. Actually, I was a speaker there one year. Jack McManus, president of the John Birch Society, was a speaker there. Duke Pesta was actually a speaker there. Willie Soon, Debbie Bachica-Lupi, all these incredible patriots, Chris Ann Hall, just incredible people who speak to these children and teach them about our history and what they need to know. And it's funny that we're having this conversation, Dan, because actually next year, this year I'm going around the country urging everybody to get their children out of the public school system immediately. And we're trying to get 1 million copies of this special report of the New American Magazine out further so that we can get millions of children out. But, say we're successful. Say we get large numbers of children out of the system. But, we're still in a situation where they don't know anything. And so next year, Dr. Duke and I and, a whole bunch of great patriots are going to be working on some resources. We're thinking probably DVDs, something like that, to bring children up to speed on what they need to know, not just about American history, but about world history, and even about science and other subjects, government, civics, other subjects that have really been not just neglected in the public school system, but completely turned upside down. So I'm delighted that we're having this conversation. Thanks again for having me on, Dan. And great stuff.
Well, Alex, thank you. And I have to tell you, you're one of the bright lights I see in the future of this country. You're a young man. You're a young family man. Even more importantly, a young Christian family man. And you have a really good understanding of the things that are going on in this country, because you're also really unique because you've been a world traveler. As a young man, you still have literally traveled all over the world, and you are the foreign correspondent for the international correspondent for the New American Magazine, and you speak 7 languages because of all those travels. So you have a unique perspective because you really are a world traveler, and you've seen the best of the best and the worst of the worst. And I see your future in this country as being one of the more dynamic, if not the most dynamic leader in this country at some point. So thank you for being a guest on the program. And I really look forward to this conversation because I was reading, incidentally, I want to mention the Red Pill University, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but Alex, you have worked with G. Edward Griffin and myself and a number of other people in trying to create what we call the Red Pill University, and I'm thinking that may end up being an excellent source of information and create an opportunity for people to know the truth. And that's something that we've been working on, and I think we're at a point right now where we need to move forward with that project, and I know you really want to. So we'll kind of explore that maybe a little later in the discussion. Hal, I want to mention the fact that you are very much Christian-based.
Yes.
Quite honestly, that's what our foundation is as a nation, is a very strong basis in Christian Protestant faith. And I know that the Connecticut or Massachusetts, I guess, refused to allow you to fly your flag. That's why on the front of the announcement that I sent out is the flag that really depicts what Camp Constitution is all about. So tell our listeners a little bit more about that.
Sure, yes. Well, I was at a prayer meeting at the mayor's office, mayor of Boston, where I live. The mayor is a socialist Marxist. I think he's basically whatever he has to do to be mayor or whatever his aspirations are. So this was in June of 2017, and it was led by a inner-city pastor, Bruce Wall. He invited me, and it was a great experience because there were blacks, whites, Hispanics, Asians. This was the church, all different people, different, very diverse, but we had a common theme. Jesus was our Savior. And the Bible does tell us to pray for our leaders. It doesn't say we have to like them. It says we got to pray for them, and we did. On the way out, I thought, this is really something. But on the way out, I see the rainbow flag flying on the flagpole, and I said, I think that we should put our Christian flag here. Now, 5 or 6 years ago, we did raise the Gadsden flag. That's the rattlesnake flag. It had a nice ceremony. We had a little expose on Agenda 21. No difficulty. So what I did was I got a hold of the lady in charge of the permitting process, and she said, just tell me what you want to do and give me a couple of dates. So our program was going to be around September 17th, which is Constitution Day, when the delegates signed off on the Constitution and submitted it to the states. And also the day the city of Boston was founded. And we weren't founded by Muslims or transgenders or Hindus. We were founded by Christians. Governor John Winthrop said he said on the Hill his famous sermon on the Arbella before getting to Boston. So we wanted to raise the Christian flag, and we were going to have one of our instructors, who's a black minister, Reverend Stevie Kraft, very dynamic guy. He'd be a great guest for you at some point. And he was going to talk about the need for racial reconciliation, because the enemies of our country are promoting race hatred. They would love to see a race war, so they would control the results of that. We also were going to have a friend of mine who's also a pastor. He was from the Sudan. He's now a very happy and proud U.S. citizen, has a beautiful family. Pastor William Levy of Operation Nehemiah. He had been tortured by the Muslim government soldiers as a teenager, and he was going to speak about the blessings of liberty that he's enjoyed, he and his family have enjoyed in this country. And then we were going to have a local historian, Richard Howell, who's another one of our instructors, just give a Christian history of Boston, and then we were going to raise the flag. So it took a little while before they actually gave me the final answer, and the answer was no, based on the First Amendment, separation of church and state. So somehow flying that, by the way, the Christian flag is non-denominational. It's mainly flown by Protestant and Protestant churches, but that doesn't represent a particular church. It's a very simple, the field of white, a blue canton with the Latin cross, the red Latin cross. That's it. That's all that's there. And it would have been up there for a day or two, maybe a week at the most. And this is a public access flagpole. This is something the city initiated, I don't know how many years ago, but since 2005, there's been close to 300 flag raisings, including our Gadsden flag raising. And some of the groups that raise their flag are the Chinese Progressive Association of Boston, which is a Maoist organization. And when they raise their flag, one of the gang, I call it the Gang of Four, they call it the Squad, Ayanna Presley. At that time, she was a city councilor. She was in the minor leagues, the socialist minor leagues. She was there speaking on behalf of this organization, praising the revolution of communist China that led to the millions of people being killed and persecuted to this very day. That's the mindset of some of these folks. They raised the flag of Cuba. They raised transgender flags, which is a new phenomenon, and of course the rainbow flag. But they said no to us. And then I sent out a news release to the local media in the wake of that. In fact, the lady in that worked for the city, she said this isn't over. She was on our side. No one from the media, local media, initially picked up on it, but a friend of mine said contact Liberty Counsel, which is a Christian-based legal team, pro bono for certain cases, and they got back to me within a day, and he said, "We like your case, we want to take it." And from there, we've got generated lots and lots and lots of media coverage. In fact, just last week, Fox News did a story on it, Breitbart, WorldNet Daily, even the New American. Can you believe that? You know you're making progress with the New American messenger, right, Alex?
Amen.
That's big time. So the case is now pending. We're optimistic that we'll do it. In fact, one of the city attorneys said that if we win our case, we're going to discontinue the use of, and that's okay too, because we're just showing their hand. We're demonstrating that the city is hostile to the Christian worldview, that the unofficial, de facto religion of the city of Boston is humanism. I think we can easily clear that. But we're also fighting the First Amendment. There's been so much misunderstanding, even among like-minded. A lot of conservatives have the notion that, well, you can't pray over milk and cookies in kindergarten. That's subversive. The separation of church and state is not in the First Amendment. It simply says that Congress cannot establish a religion or deny the free exercise thereof. And when the First Amendment was passed, there was a number of states that had state churches. Not that we're in favor of a state church, but so it was this Congregational Church of Massachusetts. Congress didn't say, "Hey, you have to disestablish that church because the First Amendment, we just passed that in 1791, so you got to." No, they it wasn't an issue, and the states eventually did away with the state church concept, something that they brought over with them, and a generation, two generations later, they said, "Yeah, this is not such a good idea," without any ACLU involvement. So we really had no choice to do this. Is if we stand for the Constitution, we got to stand for the Constitution, and so that's to me it's very encouraging that people are actually interested in this issue, and we've got our share of leftists. I've got a number of threats and some nasty comments, but I guess that's to be expected. I just say, bring it on. I mean, we're not looking to get into a fight here, and we had no intention of all this media coverage. We just want to be able to, we're citizens of Boston, or Massachusetts, and we have as much right to raise our flag as any other group. And and we have to go to court, we'll go to court.
Well, I it's kind of sad that we are in the position we're in right now because, I know that President Trump talked about the Gang of Four and the groups that are outright promoting in our Congress now communism. And there was a recent expose on Ilhan Omar's family that's not her real name. Her father was the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Propaganda in Sudan, and he was one of the key figures in the Marxist government there back in the 80s, and she was indoctrinated and brought up under radical Marxism, and now she's a congresswoman from Minnesota. I mean, isn't that just amazing that where we've come in this country and how far we've slipped from what our founders' vision really was?
Well, that's true, and I like to quote John Adams. He's my second favorite president, although he wasn't perfect like the rest of them. But he wrote a letter when he was president. He wrote a letter to the militia officers of Massachusetts when there was a true militia, and he made reference to the Constitution. He said, "This Constitution, this would be the U.S. Constitution, is made for a religious and moral people. It is wholly inadequate for the governments of any other governance." And that's the problem we face. I mean, you can't. And, I tell people there's been a movement to have an Article 5 convention, and I tell people that what they want to do is make the Constitution Common Core compliant. You can't have a classical document in a Common Core world, so they have to have a convention and restructure it. That's the term that they use, or rewrite it to make it Common Core compliant. where
Yeah,
everybody will be everybody. If you turn it into a socialist document, all the left-wing Democrats will be staunch constitutionalists overnight.
Right, exactly, and that's the real scary part about a con, and I know that there are people that are really promoting that and say, oh no, it's the way we're going to save this country. Well, the reality is we have a constitution. We have a whole bunch of politicians that swear an oath to uphold, protect, and defend that constitution and the Bill of Rights and all of the amendments. And in reality, if they won't abide by what's already there, I guarantee you, if the lawyers and the creeps that are in charge of our government right now get a chance to write it, it will go from a very straightforward, simple document to some nightmare of a legal document that will have every tutti fruity, every goofy idea in the universe will become part of that, and we will have no constitution at that point.
That's correct.
Listen, I hear the music. We've got a break, but let's pick it up on the other side.
Excellent.
This is the Micro Effect.
The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
It was 1776 when the founders signed the writ of independence from the Brits. It was revolution. Now an enemy from within would enslave us all again and deprive us of our rights in the Constitution. Restore the Republic. Wake up, it's time.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and my guests on the radio show today are Hal Shurtleff and Alex Newman, and we are talking about Camp Constitution, a concept of really challenging the public re-education efforts that are going on in this country to try to teach our people that communism and socialism and the Marxism and the humanism and all the other isms are much preferable to the concept of individualism, and why it's so important that we return to our roots. And Alex, I want to bring you back into the conversation because you are such a fantastic expert on education and what's going on, the transition of our country to a system of really socialized education and what Common Core is. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk about that transition, how it has been taking effect over a period of time, and how important it is that we start to homeschool and re-educate and bring our young people back to the idea of a constitutional republic.
Let me we have a great resource for homeschoolers, or for anyone, homeschoolers, researchers, historians, called the Sam Blumenfeld Archive. Of course, Alex and Sam co-wrote a book called Crimes of the Educators. It was Sam's last book prior to his passing. But I inherited most of his library of papers, and thanks to one particularly talented guy, our camp newspaper editor, Mark Affleck, who lives in Pennsylvania, we created the Blumenfeld Archive. And if you go to our website, campconstitution.net, you'll see the little drop-down, the archive, and all we look for is an email and a username, and we do ask for a donation. But anybody can download Sam's works, his alpha phonics. Sam learned about the reading problem in the early 60s. And unlike a lot of people who just criticize, he had a solution, and it was to bring back phonetic reading. which is really how you teach a phonetic alphabet. You don't use this look-say method. And so we have about maybe 10 or 11 of his books, PDFs. We have his speeches and audios and videos and all of his newsletters. There were a monthly newsletter he did for, I think, about 12 years. And you can actually teach people how to read using our website. The lessons are all on the online, and you can also, all of the lessons, 128 lessons from Alphaphonics in audio or video. He also has how to do cursive. You'd be surprised how many young people aren't taught cursive anymore. And the handwriting is bad to begin with, but they can't even write. It's all print now. And so there's a simple lesson. You can also, adults who are taught, say, can actually learn how to read properly. And there's a lot of information about dyslexia, how that was artificially created. And Sam was also, he understood what was happening in the world, not just the educational aspect of it, but other aspects. And he was one of the founders of American Friends of Gatanga. And those of us who read The Fearful Master, Griffin's first book, talks about how the UN went in and brutalized this peaceful province because they had uranium. And Sam was friends of the leader of that country, and when he was exiled, Sam interviewed him, and we have all of the notes and all of that. It's just an incredible resource. And I just encourage your readers to go to the website and then share it. I mean, we don't be selfish with this important resource for homeschoolers and educators.
Yeah, that's a wonderful archive, and thank you for mentioning that, Hal. Alex, you co-wrote with Bloomfeld the Crimes of the Educators, and I have to tell you, I've got that book, and I was just amazed. You are a very young man, but you are so incredibly good at the craft of communication, and I want our listener and what a special gift that is.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Dan and Hal. Thank you for bringing up Sam Blumenfeld. You know, I really have stood on the shoulders of what Sam did in all of my work. He actually went back and dug a lot of this information out of the archives, out of the correspondence, out of the old university libraries. And so without the work of Sam Blumenfeld over a period of 5 or 6 decades, a lot of this information would still be hidden and concealed. And so to kind of go back to your earlier question, Dan, you asked about how this happened, the history of how this came about. Well, people need to realize that people who created the government school system, people like Horace Mann, people like John Dewey, and of course the people who financed them, primarily the Rockefeller dynasty financed John Dewey, and in the decades that followed, a lot of these big non-profit tax-exempt foundations financed as well. And their goal all along was to fundamentally transform America. In fact, they told us that. John Dewey, just gushed out essays about the alleged need for a new social order, for a new religious system. He was a religious humanist who wanted to get rid of Christianity. I think the people who created the system, one of their chief goals was to abolish Christianity, and some of them explained this in public. Orestes Brownson, who repented and came to Christ and ended up trying to blow the whistle on what he and his co-conspirators were doing. He talked about what they were doing, which was to try to destroy Christianity, undermine the church, and totally change America. And John Dewey, the same thing. He wanted America to be a socialist and communist country. He went to Lenin's Soviet Union for inspiration, was very pleased with what he saw. And, when American parents send their children to school today, naively thinking, they're going to learn how to read and write and do math, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, in many cases, they'll be deliberately, not necessarily by the teachers. Teachers are in most cases just as much victims as the students, but they will be handicapped in such a way that they won't be able to properly learn how to read or write or do math. And, Common Core is always a big part of that. It's just the latest phase in the deliberate dumbing down and the indoctrination of America. So we are, probably as a nation, as a people, not going to survive too many more generations of this. The number of people who understand America has really dwindled dramatically. I think there's a kind of a renaissance, if you will, of understanding about the Constitution, understanding about the evil forces that we're facing. But the great majority of the population still, primarily as a result of public schools supplemented with the kind of air support from the fake media, are totally clueless about what we're losing. And so if we're going to win the battle for freedom, I think we need to recognize that education is going to have to be at the center of any effort to do that. First of all, education of our children. Right? You cannot hand your children to a state government for quote-unquote education and expect that the next generation is going to grow up and perpetuate our free political institutions. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And we need to realize that. So what we've created at the New American Magazine is a tool that we think is very, very simple, very cost-effective. If people order them in bulk, they can get them for as low as $1 per copy. You can order them at thenewamerican.com/rescuingourchildren. If people want to get one copy, we can pay the shipping and handling if you use the promo code EDUCATE19, and I'll try to give that out again before the end of the show. But we want to get 1 million copies of this out so that parents wake up. So, we spend probably the first 2/3 of the special report talking about what is happening, what has happened, and what is going to be happening with the public school system. So we give a much deeper version of the history. We explain how we got to this situation, how we went from the most literate, most highly educated society on the planet to being a nation that has been dumbed down and indoctrinated beyond recognition. We also show some of the future, where this is all going. There's right now an effort by the United Nations to usurp control over education, not just in the United States, but all over the world. I bet Common Core is, again, a big part of that. Lines up with international standards and things like that. And finally, we show what's happening today. Parents would be shocked to learn that there's men coming into first grade classrooms, kindergarten classrooms, second grade classrooms, dressed up as women, wearing demon horns, reading LGBT stories to the children. I mean, if you look at some of the stuff, I'm in California right now on the speaking tour. If you look at some of the stuff they're teaching children here, it would blow the minds of the most politically aware people in the country, because it just has gotten so bad so quickly. One of the things I'm showing in my presentation that I'm giving across America now is a video of an assistant superintendent of curricula here in California explaining why they need to teach our children about pedophilia, about child rape, as part of the history of the LGBT movement. And I'm not kidding. And I show the video because you can't expect people to believe this stuff if you just tell them. So that's what we're facing. Our kids are being destroyed. Our freedom is being destroyed. Our nation is being destroyed. We have got to take this seriously. And I think that really begins with taking our children out of public school. And then, of course, we need a broader educational effort, because we're several generations deep into this indoctrination. It's not that we can just consult our parents, and our parents are going to be able to tell us, everything that we missed out on when we got brainwashed in the government school. They were brainwashed too, right? And this has been going on for generations. So it's going to take a real concerted effort by patriotic people, by freedom-loving people, by Christians, by pastors, by ministers, to re-educate the American people with a correct understanding of everything from, political science and our Constitution to, a proper understanding of God and our God-given rights, right? The role of our Creator in securing our freedom, the role of biblical values and biblical understanding in the foundation of our country. If we don't get these things back, I think there's a very real risk that we will lose it all. And so I hope people listening will take this very seriously. And, we don't expect everybody to be able to do everything. Obviously, that's not possible. But everybody has a niche where they can help out. And so if your children are already rescued, if you've already taken them out of the system and, you've got their future secured, well, maybe you can take on some additional tasks, like helping get this information out, helping fund scholarships for other children to get out of the public schools. Some copies of the special report we did or the DVDs and get them out. Help finance somebody's tuition to go to Camp Constitution. I mean, there's all kinds of things that people out there can do to help win this fight. And honestly, if we don't get everybody who's concerned about this involved in the fight, it's going to be much more difficult for us to win.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. And the one thing that stands out is the shrillness of the opposition. And, one of the things with classical liberal education, as our as our traditions, our national traditions show it. And believe me, it's the exact opposite of what they call liberalism today. But one of the primary functions of classical liberal education is to get people to think and to create an environment for deductive reasoning, an environment for people to be able to rationalize and understand things that are very complex, and do it by a process elimination and a process of making wise choices. And right now in this country, one of the things that is the most shrill, outspoken aspect of our opposition is the fact that they're trying to, they don't want to debate this on a public forum. Don't want to have a open and free discussion of all the things that we're talking about. They just attack, and they demonize everything that we try to do, and they try to shut down the conversation. They try to shut down everything that would open this up to public debate, because they know they can't win that public debate. And Hal, that's what you are doing with Camp Constitution. And I want you to talk a little bit about, why you're doing that.
Well, there was a disturbing figure that came out that like 80% of people under 30 votes the socialist ticket, either Hillary or Bernie. And we got to change that, or either we never die, but we got to change that dynamic a little bit if we expect to be free. And Alex is totally right that if this is the education issue is the most important, because if we lose that, we'll have no impact. We'll lose everything. So what we do is we have a week-long family camp, and actually our camp is coming up this coming Sunday, and we have some great instructors. Now, it's not a big, huge, it's not like the Boy Scout Jamboree of 45,000 people. We have maybe a little over 100. We have some people that show up for the whole week and some for a few days. We have some top-notch instructors, Lord Christopher Monkton, Professor Willie Soon, John McManus, Debbie Bacigalupi, and we actually, some of our campers have become counselors and instructors, so it's also what's the right word for it, a place, an incubator for the future leaders of our nation. And we videotape practically all of our classes. So if you go to our YouTube channel, and you can go to the playlist and see what we did last year, and some of the videos, a few hundred views, and some of them 50, 60,000 views. So we're very pleased that our influence goes well beyond the confines of the camp. And we still have room available this year, next week, Sunday. So there's time, and you can go to our main page of the website, and you'll scroll down. You can see where it says 2019 schedule. We also have a great program for the youngsters. We call it the Patriot Camp or Junior Camp. We have a woman with the Daughters of the American Revolution, and Reverend Kraft's lovely wife, Edith Kraft, who's a retired school teacher. And we have guests coming in, to teach them our incredible history, and it's so much fun. And what we did, we were talking about, Alex was talking about the drag queens. Whoever would thought, we're about the same age, that this would be an issue, that libraries would be, we know that libraries have been left-wing for many years. It's nothing new. But whoever thought that drag queens would come in and sexualize little children? So we came up with Camp Constitution Reading Hour, and I was in touch with about 5 of these libraries in the New England area that have these ridiculous drag queen hours. And believe it or not, a couple of the folks that were responsible for inviting the drag queens have actually said, we'll be more than happy to have your people come in and do some readings. So in one library, we made a booking. It's not until November, but we're going to have a presentation on the Pilgrims and the first Thanksgiving that took place in 1620, almost 400 years ago. And it's going to be a upbeat thing. And we're encouraging people around the country. There's, like I said, there's only so much an individual could do, but there's probably a library in your town or city, in some cases, maybe more than one. You might be less than a half a mile. My library is it's about a 3-minute walk. Go to that library and say, look, you'd like to offer your services. And we're in the process of creating a page to recommended reading. There's so much good stuff out there. I mean, you look at the Tuttle Twins series. That's a very popular